Hello everybody, thanks for tuning in to Weather and Earth 25. I have a special video here for you all. This February of 2024, we're about to start a new Chinese year known as the Wood Dragon, and we're actually going to use this information to try to see what kind of earthquake potential this year 2024 could actually possess. Since this is about Chinese astrology, we are actually going to take into account the beginning date, which is February 10th, 2024, and run it all the way to the end of the year of the Wood Dragon, which actually happens to be January 29th, 2025. So everything that I will mention for 2024 also applies for the early part of 2025, mainly January. So where can we begin? Well, in short, I'll try to be brief so we can get mainly to the point. Chinese astrology is a 12-year/60-year cycle of natural processes. As far as what I can personally tell, when I try to apply this mystical, stuff to actual geology and meteorology, I can see there's actually pretty important and really interesting pattern that actually seems to occur over and over and over again. It happens with the weather, it also happens with earthquakes, it happens with all kinds of events. The year of the dragon is definitely a big one. As the animal sign would imply, the dragon, it's powerful, it's mighty, and definitely no slouch when it comes to major natural events. It's true. The last year of the dragon was 2012. Fortunately, that year was not as extreme as it could have been, but it still featured some pretty powerful events. There was a very large earthquake that year. That was well over magnitude 8. Now, the 60-year cycle of Chinese astrology takes into account the element of the year. So 2024 is a wood dragon year. The last time it was a dragon year, that was 2012, that was a water dragon year. And there's 5 elements in Chinese astrology. You got metal, water, wood, fire, and earth. The last time we actually had a wood dragon was way back in 1964, so 60 years ago. And if I mention 1964 and earthquakes, this should be setting off alarm bells for many. Many of you might actually know that that year had the most powerful earthquake ever registered in North America, a magnitude 9.2 event that struck on March 27th. Humongous event that struck Alaska. Produced a major tsunami as well. Claimed over 100 lives in Anchorage, Alaska. Huge tsunami traveled all across the Pacific. It was an incredibly powerful event. Fortunately, it was not as deadly as some magnitude 9.2 earthquake could have been, mostly due in part to the sparsely populated area that it struck back then. Anchorage, Alaska was the main area that got affected, but in reality there was not many more places nearby that were significantly populated where we could have had a worse death toll. But trust me, that event was incredibly brutal. Now check this out. This is a graphic that I've made actually, looking at Wood Dragon year earthquakes. Look at this. 1964's event in Alaska is at the very top left part of the map, way up in Alaska. Huge event, 9.2. But also look at the other years on the map. All of these were Wood Dragon years, going back at least 400 years for the most part. You will see the most important events that have happened for this 60-year cycle of the Chinese zodiac. Now, since this year, the Wood Dragon year starts February the 10th, and it runs all the way through January 29th, 2025, everything we'll mention for 2024 Wood Dragon also applies into early 2025. In fact, several of the events that you'll see in this map occurred in years that ended in 5, such as 1785, 1725, 1605, or if you can see the dates, it happened in January or early February. I did my research and I noticed that they were still within the Wood Dragon year boundary before the next zodiac sign began. So, those are definitely being included as analogs. Just looking at this map alone, we can see trends. South America, I'm looking at you. That right there is a cluster, my friends. That is a cluster. 4 powerful earthquakes of at least magnitude 7.5 that have happened there in past Wood Dragon years, with the biggest one being the 1604 megaquake that happened at the Peru-Chile border on 24 November, estimated to be magnitude 9.0, just almost as big as the 1964 Alaska event, but at the opposite side of the American continent. That is a monster. The city of Arequipa that had just been founded got devastated by that event in southern Peru, and the tsunami was generated all up and down the South American coast for 1,500 miles, according to records and reports. Huge event. Another trans-Pacific tsunami. The 25th of November, the day after, tsunami struck the Seychelles Islands, well out in the Pacific, almost towards Asia. It was a big event. And definitely something worth keeping in mind if we're going to look at analogs for 2024. 4 big earthquakes, and since 1604 to 1964, which was the last dragon year of the element wood, that's 7 Wood Dragon years that have happened between 1604 and 1964. Peru and northern Chile have had 4 big earthquakes over 7.5 in 7 Wood Dragon years. 4 of them had an event. If we divide 4 by 7, you get 57 as a decimal, 0.57. This means 57% chance, according to this history, that we could see a magnitude 7.5 or greater event in Peru and extreme northern Chile. That is a really big and bold percentage. Now please take this with a grain of salt. That's why I'm saying these are experimental predictions. But if I was going to go ahead and be bold here, I would definitely say Peru, Chile, this is your year to keep an eye on for major earthquakes. There's about a 57% chance that we might see something of magnitude 7.5 or greater between February 10th, 2024 and January 29th, 2025. That's a prediction right there, guys. We're keeping this part of the world in the red square, the most risky place to watch, just by looking at this graphic. Now, there's other events as well that have happened elsewhere in the world. Iceland had a very powerful earthquake in 1784. Remember, Iceland is having a volcanic eruption right now ongoing. This is a potential heads up that we might see something big there this year in 2024, especially later this year. Keep an eye out for a possible large earthquake here, or maybe even a volcanic event, since we're already seeing this. I mean, there's a trend there. The Middle East and Mediterranean has also been somewhat active during these Wood Dragon years. There's even a lone event from 1184 AD that happened in May 24th. But then 1784 had the most powerful earthquake in that part of the world at a 7.6 in July, and it was a very bad one. It was a very powerful earthquake in Turkey, very close to where the 2023 event happened. So this should be a wake-up call, or more of a heads up, that still keep an eye on the Mediterranean and the Middle East. Turkey, Afghanistan, any of these countries that have had earthquakes in 2023 could possibly have more follow-up earthquakes in 2024. Definitely worth keeping an eye on. Now, the record here is not as bad as what last year's would have been. You know, I did some digging around for the previous year as well. All the years related to 2023, and the Mediterranean, Middle East was definitely a super hot spot. So in reality, 2024's analogs don't look as bad as what 2023's analogs were, if that was to serve some good news. But in reality, we're still not out of the woods. Keep an eye on this part of the world. There's still a chance something can happen. I would say yellow level alert, just in case, you know, just because of previous events. And then in Far Eastern Asia, there's also some significant events that have happened, especially in Japan and Eastern China, between China and Taiwan. Pretty powerful earthquake back there in 1604. In fact, Japan had a pretty bad earthquake to start the year 2024 on January 1st. This could be a sign that more powerful earthquakes might happen in Japan in the coming months. And we can see, you know, that in 1605 February, which was late in the dragon year back then, it happened. And then in June 1964. So there's a chance that maybe towards the middle to latter part of this year, we're going to have an earthquake in Japan. If we talk about dates, there's a lot of repeats here. Going back to Peru, there's 2 events that happened in Peru, 1664 and 1784. They both happened in the middle of May, just one day apart. May 12th, May 13th. Now, in Central America and the northern part of Peru, in 1725 and 1785, they had 2 pretty bad earthquakes in the mid 7.56 range, and they both happened a day apart as well, January 6th and January 7th. There is some clustering there, guys. And in the Middle East in 1844, even though these were fairly small earthquakes, they were still fairly devastating, struck on May 12th and May 13th once again. The far South Pacific got hit on May 26, 1964. The 1184 earthquake that happened in Italy, May 24th. A lot of May events, guys. This could be a heads up. Wood Dragon favors the month of May. Mid-May in particular could be very active. That could be one of the biggest months to watch this year. Aside from the most active months, also keep an eye on the months that have had the biggest events. Definitely watch out with March, especially late March, and definitely keep an eye on late November with that 24 November analog there. And I would say even into December, considering Eastern China had that 8.1 earthquake on 29 December. So that's just using the Wood Dragon now. Now, if we want to try and make this a little more inclusive, let's look at this other map that I've made. Now here we're taking all those Wood Dragon years, earthquakes, and putting them on this map that includes all the other dragon years as well. So now we're not just looking at Wood Dragon, now we're looking at all the dragon years. At least going back 300 years that I've been able to find. Mind you, this is not a complete list. There's been more events that have happened, but these are among the most significant earthquakes that I could find in the records. All the Wood Dragon year events are already there in the green dots with their corresponding dates in green, but you also see other colors like blue, brown, red, and silver, gray. Those represent the other metal dragons. The other elemental dragons, like Metal Dragon, for instance, in 2000, or Water Dragon in 2012, etc. And you might see that there's a bit of a pattern. Like, for example, the water years in blue favored events towards the eastern side of the world. Indonesia had one, Japan had one, and the eastern side of Russia had one in 1952 and 2012 active. There was one lone event in California in 1952, magnitude 7.3, but the majority happened on the other side of the world. Fire Dragon years, being in the red, probably have the most events for all dragon years, or well, up there with Wood Dragon. But in reality, the Fire Dragon earthquakes are among some of the worst in world history. They happened in Central America, a few. There's some in the Middle East as well, Europe, but a very great severity amount in China and Southeast Asia. And there's devastating events there. 1556, 1976, 1976 as well in the Papua New Guinea as well as the Philippines. All those are extremely powerful and deadly earthquakes. Well worth mentioning, even among the world's deadliest. Like what happened in Tangshan, China in 1976, or in the Shaanxi region in 1556. They were both tremendously deadly earthquakes. Fortunately, 2024 doesn't look like it's such a big risk for this part of Asia like the Fire Dragon years are. For those wondering, the Fire Dragon comes next in 2036. So if this prediction for 2024 comes true in a pretty interesting way, I would say come 2036, keep a very close eye on East Asia, because it could be a really big one for them then. But let's go back to 2024's. So basically you can see the patterns there. This is where all the other dragon events have happened. Metal Dragon years like 2000 or 1820 had a cluster of events right along Indonesia, more than anywhere else in the world. Although there was one lone event in Peru that happened in 1940. But there's also something interesting there. Look at the dates. When in 1940? May 24th. When in 2000? Over there in Papua New Guinea? November 16th. Okay, there's repeat dates. This goes back to show that maybe the month of May definitely bears watching. And definitely the month of November, because there's a lot of big events there. you'll see that some of these numbers are bigger than others. The bigger the year and the date, the more powerful the magnitude of the event. That's how I quoted this calendar. Quoted this map with the dates on there. So, in my theory, I would say keep an eye on the time of the year that has had the most events, which would be May in this case. And also keep an eye on the time of the years that have historically had the biggest earthquakes, like the most powerful earthquakes during Dragon Year. Looking at this map, I could tell you late March, early April has had a few but very powerful earthquakes. And then definitely November, guys. November has probably had the most major earthquakes out of this whole map here. Huge events in Kamchatka, Russia was a 9.0 magnitude. Same thing with 1604 in extreme southern Peru. Another magnitude 9er happened in November. 2000 had a magnitude 8 in November. There's a devastating Turkey event in 1976, happened November 24th. Same day as the 1604 event. There's a lot of November dates here. So, that's something to keep an eye on, guys. Now, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys what I think could happen this 2024. We're going to take into account everything that we've talked about so far. The locations of these historical earthquakes. We're going to put a special emphasis on wood dragon events. Since we're in the wood dragon year, I feel like the wood dragon analogs should weigh heavier than the other dragon year analogs. But the whole big picture with all the dragon years showing where things have happened is also going to help us see what other parts of the world bear watching besides the ones that have been hit in years like wood dragon. And we're also going to keep an eye on and keep in mind the dates that might seem more favoring for these large events. And last but not least, we're also going to take into account areas that have recently seen earthquake activity. So we're going to take a little bit of a blend. It's not just the astrology alone that could show us the pattern of where we could see these events and how bad they can be, but also we're going to take a bit of a scientific approach and try to keep an eye on locations that have had recent earthquake activity. That means the Middle East, places like Turkey, Afghanistan, even Morocco that had bad earthquakes back in September and October. Turkey that had a big one in February of last year, 2023, is still fairly fresh. It could trigger more events in other parts of the Middle East, including Turkey as well. Keep an eye on Nepal. Keep an eye as well on Japan, which actually had the earthquake on January 1st of 2024. That could set the stage for another powerful event later this year in Japan. The Philippines has been active since November with a lot of powerful earthquakes in southern Philippines. Take all that and combine it with these Year of the Dragon analogs, and we should come up with a prediction. And well, the experiment is going to be that. So guys, get ready. This is what I think is going to happen in 2024 going to early 2025. The Year of the Wood Dragon and what it could bring. Here we go. Alright folks, so here are the predictions now for 2024's Wood Dragon Year that goes into early 2025. Since this is a Chinese Year of the Wood Dragon, it's valid for February 10th through January 29th, 2025. You'll see the colored areas, you'll see some dates, you'll see some colors at the bottom. Let me explain what this means. Areas that are shaded inside the red boxes. In reality, not shaded, but just more like boxed in. Any part you see in the world that's inside a red square or a red rectangle is the most risky place to watch for 2024 into early 2025. This is based mostly on the strong correlations of Wood Year analog for the dragon and maybe some of the other Dragon Year analogs combined with also places that have seen recent earthquake activity in the past 6 months. Next up, we have the yellow color, the yellow-orange boxes. Any place that's inside the yellow-orange box has the second highest risk for seeing an event this year. This also has to do with Wood Dragon Year analogs as well as the other Year of the Dragon analogs I showed in the other map. Also taking into account places that have had recent earthquake activity in the past 6 months to a year. A lot of the Middle East falls under this umbrella, as well as parts of Eastern Asia. and parts of Central America going up into North America. You know, they still have a fairly decent chance of having something this year. Places inside the green squares and rectangles, they have a lesser risk but still somewhat noticeable. This mostly comes from the other Year of the Dragon analogs, not so much the Wood Dragon, but more like the other Dragon Year analogs, and also involve places that have not seen that much recent earthquake activity in the past 6 months to a year. Places in blue have the lower of the risks, but still notable enough to mention, mostly based on past Year of the Dragon analogs, but locations that have had little earthquake activity in the last 6 months to a year. And any part of the world that is not colored in anything basically has a near normal equal chance, basically very low risk for anything to happen. So these places should be okay in 2024 going to early 2025. Now, as you saw in the previous analog years, there were certain times of the year where things seemed that they were more likely to be bad because of these big earthquake dates happening. You know, some events happen in May, some happen in November, etc. This leads us to believe where we could see the biggest events and when they could happen. At the bottom of this map, you have the months in different colors. That basically indicates how risky they are compared to each other. Months in green have the lower risks. Months in yellow have the medium risk, and months in red have the highest risk. In addition, next to those squares that I've put in red and orange, I've actually put some dates, you know, which according to the past history of these dragon years, we might want to keep an eye during those particular date ranges this year, just in case. They're probably the more likely dates where we could see something based on the historical events. So there you have it, guys. This is what my prediction for earthquakes looks like for 2024 going into early 2025. Again, this is experimental. Take it with a grain of salt. But at the same time, I hope you find this useful. Let's see what this year brings. I have a big feeling it's going to be a really big year for the world when it comes to earthquakes. It's probably going to have the most powerful earthquakes we have seen in quite some time. The Americas are likely going to have a huge amount of earthquakes, or if not, simply they're just going to have a very powerful earthquake somewhere in the Americas. It almost seems like a given this time around. Might have a big earthquake that we haven't seen in a long time along this side of the world. It definitely looks like the year for the Americas, especially South America, in my opinion. But, you know, time will tell, guys, what happens exactly in 2024. My opinion, it's almost a guarantee we're going to see at least one magnitude 8 earthquake this year, which would be the first time we have seen a real magnitude 8 since 2021. We shall see. But guys, the Wood Dragon is a very powerful year. I'm expecting a lot of activity from this one. So if you live in an earthquake area, especially a year like this one, keep your earthquake plan in mind. Take precautions as necessary. Always keep that in mind. Have your earthquake plan in place in case something happens. Hopefully nothing happens, and hopefully this prediction does not come true. But here you go, guys. You know, I hope you guys find this useful once again. Thanks for watching. You know, if you like this video, please hit that like button. I would really appreciate it. Also follow my channel, subscribe so you can get updates whenever I post something new. That kind of thing. I really appreciate you guys watching this again. Take care, okay? Have a good one. Bye.